Are you tired of losing because of some stupid mistakes? Would you like to finally get to 1000 and above? In this video, I'm gonna show you the most common beginners' mistakes and of course, what to do about it. If you properly understand the nature of your mistakes, you're gonna tremendously improve your chess in no time. Hi guys, and welcome to Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every aspect of your chess game. And today I want to show you this game of my student who is about 800 rating, and I'm going to explain you all of the mistakes that happen in this game, as well as how to avoid it and how to improve your chess level in general. So, my student played as white this game, and it started with a move d4. We have learned a very solid and flexible system for white. By the way, I really recommend you try it. The link to the video would be in the description, where I explain in all details how you do it. So the point is, you play d4, the knight goes to f3, the pawn goes to e3, bishop goes to d3, the second one to b2, you castle, and then you attack in the center and on the king side. A very, very powerful system. It's called the Collie system. And yeah, that is a very good opponent for white. But what happened? The opponent played e5 on the first move and just destroys the whole plan, because now, well, my student still played knight f3 and said, oh, I don't care what's happening on the game, on the board. I'm going to just continue my plan no matter what. But, well, that's the first common beginner's mistake. Don't follow your plan blindly. Always try to take into account the real situation on the board. Because here, black could just play e4 and then attack the knight, and it's so inconvenient for white. You need to go back, but then you're wasting more time with this one piece, which is now passive, which is blocking our pieces. So yeah, that is not that great. What could have happened instead? Well, white could just take this pawn, and that is the most active move you have. So we are gonna get to it as well. Always try to start with the most active move. Knight f3, but somehow black played knight c6, not following the idea of pushing this pawn forward, and now my student took, which is rather great because that's very, very active. Even better would be d5, but well, for a beginner level, that is rather tough. By the way, my student has around 800 rating, and the opponent also around that, so that is a very, very interesting game, and hopefully will be very instructive for you. The opponent played queen e7, developing another piece. Well, normally you don't develop the queen so early, but here it has a purpose. It's attacking this pawn, and for black, of course, it's very important to capture this pawn back. Otherwise, it's very difficult to develop the pieces somehow. And so here my student continued the plan with e3. Remember, this bishop goes here, the second one goes here, and so on. But of course, well, there was more active moves like bishop g5, like knight c3, but we haven't learned that, so it was very difficult for my student to come up with that on her own. So she played e3, and now knight takes e5, and that's the next most common beginner's mistake, to make two moves with the same piece in the opening. So I always teach my students that you should develop your pieces as fast as possible. And to achieve that, you should ideally make just one move with one piece. Of course, if it's under attack and, well, you don't want to lose it, you have to make another move with it. But otherwise, you just want to continue your development as fast as possible. And here, bishop e2 would achieve that goal. But I assume my student didn't play it because we learned that the bishop should go to d3 in the system. And here, it's not that great because the knight can exchange it. And of course, we learned that you should never exchange your bishop for a knight without a very good reason. So that is why my student took and then played bishop d3. But the problem is, suddenly in this situation, you find out that none of your pieces are developed, and black is already having a very active queen in the center, and yeah, somehow it's not what you want to get in the opening. But if you start with bishop e2 and then black exchanges, then it's different, because now you have already developed your bishop, it's very active, and you're ready to make the castles. So that is the difference here. After knight takes and bishop to d3, black could have just continued the development normally or fighting for the center, but instead the opponent played queen to d5, which is, yeah, once again the same beginner's mistake, that you move your piece more than once in the opening. So please always remember not to do that. White played here castles, which is a right move. So of course this queen was attacking the pawn on g2. But don't make a threat just with the purpose to make a threat, just hoping that your opponent is gonna blunder it. Because castles is a very reasonable move for white, which white wanted to make anyway. And now this queen is very, very bad placed on this d5 square, because the knight is coming with a tempo, and well, it could be attacked in different ways. It's stopping black's pawn from going to d5, where it would be great. So, and also it's just wasting the time, which is incredibly important in the opening to develop your pieces. d6, now finally continuing the development. And white played here b3. Remember, we learned this plan. So my opponent said, my student said, I'm going to do it no matter what. I'm going to continue the plan. And really, if you take a look at it, if white manages to place the bishop here, that would be just a great piece. But the problem is black plays queen f5 and now controlling this diagonal. And so here comes the next common beginner's mistake, basically the most important one in this entire video. So my student played bishop b2, just saying, well, that was my plan, so I'm gonna go for it. And the mistake is never make a move unless you're sure that this piece cannot be taken. So if you just master this one mistake, if you just take one thing out of this video, take this one, because it's going to improve your chess tremendously in no time. Because, well, just make sure once you make a move, you're here and you think, well, I want to play bishop b2. What's going to happen in this case? Can this bishop be taken? If the answer is yes, and of course you look at your opponent's pieces to find out that, is somebody attacking this bishop? Yes, the queen is attacking this piece, so I cannot play bishop b2. Then you're not gonna never make this mistake, and you're gonna get rid of 99% of all of the blunders, which is of course the main reason why beginners lose the game. So bishop b2, queen takes, but believe me, it's just the beginning of this incredible game, because at beginner's level, being a piece down doesn't mean that you're going to lose the game in the end of the day. So knight d2. Now my student went back to our plan. Well, the bishop is gone, but still she tries to follow the plan. Queen goes to c3. So for some reason, black doesn't want to develop the pieces at all, just playing with one queen. It worked well so far, so why to change the strategy? Now I'm just joking. You should always try to develop as many pieces as possible, not just playing with one queen or one piece. Queen f5, now still the same piece, but here it was a move with a tempo. So the knight is active now, and white should try to continue chasing this queen somehow, maybe f4, but of course for a beginner it's a dangerous move, as it's gonna open up the king a little bit. Queen e2, continuing the development. Now d5, finally this pawn goes where it belongs, to the center, and now controlling a lot of squares. Knight goes to g3. Now d4, which is rather weird move. Once again, instead of developing something new, black goes d4, and white just captures it. And of course, exchanging the queens when you're a piece down is not such a great thing, but in this case, at least white wins a pawn, and also, apart from taking it, well, it's difficult. You can develop a rook maybe, but, well, at least white gains some material back. So that is why my student did it. Bishop went to e7, now rook to a to e1, and that's another beginner's mistake. So developing a rook is great, I totally support it, but the other rook might come to e1, and then you still have a lot of good squares, for example d1 or maybe c1 for this a rook. But if you play rook a to f1, you're basically blocking your other rook, and you're not given any developing opportunities for it. So that is not a good thing here. So always try to think about all of your pieces, about the ways to develop all of it, and leave some space for all of the pieces. Now black played knight f6, finally developing some stuff, h3. Well, that is a useful move because it stops pieces from coming to g4, it creates some loops for the king just in case, but that is probably not the most active move. Here we can develop the bishop, and that would stop the opponent from being developed. So the tip is always try to start with the most active move. And, well, of course, making your piece, making a check, attacking something, capturing something is always more active than just playing h3. So only if you don't have any active opportunities, then you might come to some useful moves, but that are less active for you. Okay, and yeah, now black made castles, and of course it's much more difficult for white to attack because there is no king in the center. That is why it was so important to make this active move to open up this file. Remember that rooks always love open files, and open files are the files where you have no pawns. But of course, if you have bishop just in front of the rook, which is blocking it, then it makes no sense to have the rook there. So you need to remove the bishop from here, then the rook is very active, and that would be a headache for black in terms of how do you castle now if I play bishop c4. Do you play bishop e6, but then I can get another pawn and double my rooks along the d file, or do you go to the d file with the king, but then you're not castle and your rooks are not connected? So it's kind of a problem for black. That would have been difficult, but if you play h3, of course, now black just castles and there is no problem at all. Now bishop went to c4, bishop e6. Well, offering another exchange, and of course for black it's great to exchange things since they have an extra bishop, but well, white could have just gained another pawn here by taking it, and that would be already 2 pawns for a piece, and you remember that bishop is roughly 3 pawns, so it's already not that bad. But for some reason white played rook e2. Now I guess the idea is to double the rooks, but of course same mistake, not starting with the most active moves. So you should always start with a check. In this position there are no checks possible, then with the captures. And here we can take this bishop and win another pawn. Of course, we have to calculate the variation first, what's going to happen. So bishop takes e6, pawn takes. Can we continue it? Can we take something? Can we give a check? Yes, we can take this pawn, and that would be great for us. Instead, rook e2 happened, and black didn't take on c4, probably doing the same mistake, not starting with the most active move, although rook d8 is also pretty good, developing the rook and attacking this pawn on d4. And now my student realized the mistake and took this bishop and gained this pawn back. This rook went to e8. Once again, remember that you never want to make 2 moves with the same piece, because, well, it's just a waste of a tempo. The rook could have be gone to e8 in one tempo, and instead black just wasted 2 here. So for example, this rook might be relocated to e8, or this bishop might be placed somewhere stable like d6, but yeah, rook d8 just waste another tempo. Now, knight f5, my student is creating another threat attacking the bishop, and I pretty much like it because, remember, you always want to create as many problems for your opponent as possible, and eventually it's going to be very difficult for him or her to deal with all of those threats. And if you don't create any problems, then it's so simple for the opponent to play, and it's so difficult for you to win the game. So create the threats, as many as you can, but also try to make it useful for yourself, because like I said, it doesn't make any sense or little sense to play the hope chess, so-called, when you are just making a move which is not useful for you, just hoping that your opponent is going to blunder. But if he's not, then it's just a bad move for you. So in this case, this knight on g3 wasn't doing much. On f5, it's much more active. So it's a useful move, but at the same time, it creates a huge threat of winning a whole piece. Knight d5, also very good move for black, because it's defending this knight on, this bishop on e7 with a knight, and also opening up the rook, creating a threat of attacking this knight. So white took it, and well, that's another beginner's mistake, to exchange the material when you are some material down. So imagine that you're playing football or some sports game, and you have like 10 players against 9. Well, the difference is not that huge, but you still have 1 player more, so it's great. But if you have just 2 players against 1, then the difference is tremendous. And so when you're exchanging your pieces, basically with every exchange, you are getting closer to this 2 against 1. So if you are some material down, try not to exchange the pieces. If you are some material up, try to exchange the pieces, because of course you want to get to that situation. In this case, well, it's difficult to give a good advice because the knight is under attack. You don't want to go back. You never want to go back. And you have to do something about it. Maybe you can play g4, but it's dangerous. Maybe you can play rook e5, because that would defend this knight and attack this knight. And then you get some time to develop the other rook. That could have been a good move. Knight takes e7, and now a lot of pieces are going off the board, which of course makes the task simpler for black, but well, white is still trying to be active. Rook e8, rook e1, and black played rook e8. Well, now this knight is pinned, so I don't really like this move, rook to e8. You could have played just knight f5, d5, c6, somewhere just, or even just king f7, defending this knight, but not getting into trouble with this pin. So white tried to be as active as possible here. The rook is already active, so the only thing to activate are the pawns, so c4, and now d5. You can see here a perfect pawn chain. You always should try to create a pawn chain, because all of the pawns are protecting each other. Only this a2 pawn is not protected, and for the opponent it's so difficult to get to this pawn. And now black played c5, which is incredibly bad, because it allows white to get the piece back. And that's another common mistake, of course, not thinking about your opponent's threats. So before you make your move, you should always try to understand what would your opponent do, what could happen next. And you must always start with most active moves too, not only for yourself, but also for your opponent. Checks, captures, and threats. There are no checks available for white. There are no captures except for rook takes e7, but that is simple. That doesn't work for white. So the threats. The threats are mainly attacking some pieces. What could you attack here? Well, basically the only thing you can attack here is this knight, because the a7, you're looking at the unprotected pieces. So those pawns are protected, the a7 pawn is unprotected, but you can never attack it. And those two are protected. The rook is unprotected, but you also can't really attack it. So the only thing left is the knight, and there is a way to attack it, d6. Then, of course, you need to calculate what's going to happen in this case, and the problem is the knight is pinned, so it can't go anywhere as the rook would be taken. That is what black should have thought before making this move c5. Black didn't do it, and that is why white played here d6 and winning the knight. King f8, at least black protected this knight so that black can win this pawn at the end of the day. So that is what happened. And now we have an endgame. By the way, here, rook takes e7 is a very good move for white, because if you notice, if you count the pawn, it's one extra pawn for white. And in this case, you always want to get to the pawn endgames, because in 99% of the cases, it's going to be winning for you if you have an extra pawn. But here, white made a mistake, because the most important thing in the pawn endgames is to bring your king closer to the actions, and normally closer to the center. So the king should go to the center as fast as possible, maybe with a move f4, then king f2, king e3, or just, going this way. The most important thing is to bring it there, not to allow black's king to penetrate, and then with the time you can convert your extra pawn, creating a passer. That should have been the plan, but instead white is playing a4, which is basically just wasting the time and also making it more vulnerable in white's camp. You remember that the pawn chain is great because those pawns are protected, and it takes so much time to get to this a2 pawn to get it. But if you play a4, now you shorten this path for your opponent, and it's simpler to get to b3 pawns than to a2. And so the whole pawns are weaker now, and the king is not moving the center, which you remember is the most important thing, and that makes white's task here much more difficult to win the game. But black played a5, repeating white's mistake, not moving the king to the center. So the first one to bring the king to the center will probably win the game, but nobody wants to do that for some reason. And white played h4, which is another move with the tempo. Remember that you can always move your pawns afterwards. The question is, who is going to be the first one to get the king into the center to control a better king's position, and afterwards you still have a lot of time to push your pawns. You're not in a hurry to do it right now, and so that is very important. But both sides seem to think that that is the main thing in the endgame. It's not. And here, white plays g3, which is basically blundering the whole advantage. For example, this position is completely winning for white. You can see it on the bar evaluation. But to win, you have to bring your king to the center. So f4 would work because it helps to shorten the path. And king f1 would work because it's just going towards the center with the king. But g3 is not working because now black is the first one to get to the center. King a6, finally, both sides understand now what is the most important thing and going on with the kings. Well, g6 is not really following this pattern, so it gives white some tempo. But instead of making the right move, I guess at this point you understand that the right move is king to a3, going towards the center, but white plays king to h3 for some reason. And that is a horrible mistake because now this king is far away from the center. The position is still great for white because Well, a pawn is a pawn, but you see that you give a huge chance for black here, or maybe even this way. It's going to be much faster. And so white played here g4, and that gives black another opportunity. That's a huge mistake. Now from a winning position, it turns out to be a winning position for black instead of white because of this move king f4. And now you could see that this king is just hopeless here, and black is gonna capture a pawn, and then black is gonna be just much better thanks to this better king. Instead, what could have played is f3, not allowing black's king to penetrate this way. And if he goes this way, then white, thanks to this extra pawn, is still the first one to create a passer. And in pawn endgames, it's all about the passers. If you can create one and if you can promote it, then of course you're going to win the game. So here, the move g4 could have played, and then black is just not in time to create the passer over here because this pawn is already going on. And you have to go back, but then, well, it's still quite tricky because king g3 seems to be the most obvious move, but then king e4, and actually you're not winning because you have to go somewhere and you lose a pawn. So you have to be careful to play something like king g2, because now after king e4, you play king g3, and it's white to move, and you're in time to defend this pawn. And once you defend it, once you have an extra passer, you always win the game. You can just, yeah, basically do whatever you want, push it a little bit, go take another pawn, and yeah, the game is easily winning. But what happened in the game instead is g4 here, and black used this chance to go on to f4, and now takes, and there is no way to save this h4 pawn. And that is another common beginner's mistake. Don't allow your opponent to create a distant passer, because this passer will always win the game. So, well, white has to move somewhere, and now black just takes this one, and the material is equal, but black is completely winning thanks to this passer, because it's gonna take so much time for white to capture it, and then the king would be so far away from the actions. Remember, the key is always to have your king close to the actions. And here the king should go there and stop this pawn, but in the meantime, this king will come here and just crush all of the pawns. And that is basically what happened here, because at some point you have to stop the h pawn, and black is just taking everything, and that is why I resigned here. So I hope you understand the nature of beginner's mistakes now and how to avoid it in your own games. And in this video, I share with you the #1 habit to improve your chess fast.